everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for episode 8 of season 3 of Revise and Resubmit. I'm Dr. Kim Bissell, the Southern Progress Endowed Professor in Magazine Journalism and the Associate Dean for Research in the College of Communication and Information Sciences at the University of Alabama.
And I'm Dr. Lisa Bowen, an assistant professor in the Department of Communication Studies, also at the University of Alabama, and we both work in the Institute for Communication and Information Research, or the ICIR, at UA. So, Kim, I know that we both do at least a little bit of social media scrolling, and
Maybe a little,
maybe
yeah.
a tiny bit. And I often send you pictures that I find on social media of donuts, or cake, or cookies, or
Or
fancy
furniture, yes, yes.
furniture. But I wonder how much thought is put into each of those posts. Like, were there multiple takes? How long did they take creating the picture? Are the people posting hoping for likes or purchases? Probably purchases, visits to be picked up by other media. And
Mhm.
know that when I post on social media, it's not really about picked up by additional media. Although, to be honest, I just know that phone call recruiting my puppies for modeling is coming any day.
Any day, absolutely. All of our puppies and kitties are going to be stars. It's just a matter of time. One thing that I think about when it comes to social media is that I see a lot of posts from people, including some of the famous people, that I don't see covered on the mainstream media.
Yes, and including those people who I think should be famous. So, like, I follow a woman who has a running streak that's over a decade. It's actually like, why is she not covered nightly on Sports Center? Shout out to at Daily Run with Ja.
So today we talked with Dr. Lauren Reichart Smith, an associate professor in the media school at Indiana University, about her research, which is really cool. She studies who gets coverage and how they get coverage. And I'm not going to spoil what she talks about, but as you might guess, or maybe have observed, there are indeed incongruencies in how athletes are portrayed in mainstream media and how they portray themselves on social media. So stick with us as we talk today with Dr. Lauren Reichart Smith. Welcome, Lauren. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us. We are thrilled to be able to catch up with you today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Okay, Lauren. So we will talk about research, but I heard a rumor that there is something special and unique about you, and that is that not only are you a triathlete, I mean, that's cool itself, but you are an Ironman. Like, okay, I don't even know, but it's very fancy and very cool and amazing. So can you tell me and our listeners what that means? What are you, swimming, biking, running, and all at one time?
All of the above. The Ironman is the longest distance triathlon race that there is. There's multiple different distances, but the Ironman is the longest. It is a 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike, and then a marathon, 26.2 mile run. And you have 17 hours to do it in. So we start at sunrise and you go until you're done. And it is a long day, but it's fun. And so I've done 2 and I'm about to do my 3rd in a couple weeks.
Wow.
So I'm still trying to process all those miles consecutively in the same 24-hour span. And I promise we're definitely going to get to your research and scholarship. But do you have like a favorite race or a favorite race story that you can share with our listeners?
Gosh, I mean, I have a lot of good moments and a lot of good memories. I think probably one of my favorites would be my first Ironman that I did. I did it in 2017. I had a coach. He did not, he flat out told me, "I don't think you can do this." Which, if you tell me that, my reaction is going to be, screw you, watch me. So, it was in Louisville. It was such a great atmosphere. And, a bunch of my friends were there to spectate. My husband was obviously there. It was from start to finish. It was such a fun and exciting day. I loved everything about it. Obviously enough to keep doing more. So,
That's awesome.
there's so many great memories from that day. That's probably one of my favorites.
I like that. And as a one-time half marathoner,
Nice.
who was constantly looking behind me for the bus, me up. Like 17, you have 17 hours, and then is there a bus that comes and gets the
Yeah, well, in each discipline, there's a cutoff. So if you don't finish the swim in, I think it's 2 hours and 20 minutes, then they just pull you off the course. And then the bike has a couple different cutoffs, because the thought is if you can't make those time cutoffs, you're not going to finish in the 17 hours. So, and at some venues they have to pull you out of the water so the boats can get out there or the cars can get back on the road if the bike course. So, but yeah, if you're still out there at 17 hours on the run, usually they'll let you finish and cross the finish line, but that you're going to get the DNF, the do not finish distinction after your name. So,
womp womp.
Well, I know.
It's a big oof.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And
Yes.
we will now shift gears and hear about some of the other stuff you're doing.
Sure.
So you are not currently at the University of Alabama, and so we would like for you to give us some basic information about who you are and what you do. We've heard all about triathlons and Ironman, but we call this the rapid fire section of our conversation with you, and this is just where we get to know you a little bit more.
Okay.
All right. So first, where are you from, or where did you grow up?
I am from Connecticut. I was born and raised there, in a small town in the suburbs of New York City, in one of those commuter towns. And I stayed in that area through college. I did my undergrad at Fairfield University. And then when I graduated, I was ready for a change of scenery. I was ready for something different. So I moved to Atlanta. And then I spent my professional career bouncing back and forth between Atlanta and Birmingham. I did promotions. I was a television promotions producer first. Then I bounced over to concert sponsorship marketing for a couple years. And then I bounced back to TV, worked my way up to promotions manager until I decided to switch gears completely and go back to school and get my PhD.
Wow. Okay. So I'm going to have questions about those words because I don't even know what they mean.
Sure.
For that, where are you now?
I am currently an associate professor in the media school at Indiana University.
And what city is that in?
It is Bloomington, Indiana. We're about an hour southwest of Indianapolis.
Gotcha. And then when were you at the University of Alabama?
I was there from 2007 and I graduated in 2010.
Perfect.
Okay, so that's a great intro to who you are and what you do. And what we'd like to do now is get a little more in-depth information about kind of who you are as a researcher and as a scholar. But
Okay.
I have to ask this. What did the young Lauren think she would be doing when she grew up? I mean, maybe it was in TV, but we kind of like our listeners to hear the path to the PhD and the path to academia. So did you think you would be a professor when you were 10 or 12 or 14?
No, not at all. I mean, I didn't even think I was going to be a professor when I graduated college. So if I go back to young Lauren, I think first young Lauren was planning to be the next Mary Lou Retton. That was going to be my journey. And then when that was not reality, I think I cycled through sort of the normal things that kids want to be. I was going to be an astronaut. I was going to be a doctor. And my mom is a nurse, and she said, I have always said I would never be a nurse. So apparently that was off the table. When I started college, I started college trying to be an athletic trainer major.
Wow.
But chemistry happened, and they asked me to leave the program after that. So I I moved over to communication where there was a lot less math. And like I said, even when I graduated college, I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do. It was something in sports. That it morphed into working into television, and eventually there I circled around to doing, promotions and branding for our sports department. But even when I was a senior in college, I wrote a paper for my undergraduate research capstone course. And the professor submitted several of our papers to the undergraduate honors conference that DePaul University does every year.
Mhm.
The Fairfield magazine did a piece on those of us that got accepted. And I found this piece not that long ago, but I'm quoted in that magazine article as saying, "I'm the black sheep of the conference because I'm the only one that doesn't want to go to grad school." And I found that and went, well, that didn't really pan out. So,
You should
it,
yourself.
yeah. It was during when I got my master's. I was working in Birmingham at the time. I found in our employee handbook, I was working for the Fox O&O in Birmingham, and I found in the employee handbook that they would pay towards education. So I thought, well, if someone else is going to pay for me to get a master's, then I'll go. And so I got my master's there. And that's really when I started to fall in love with research and the research process. In my last television job in Atlanta, I told my boss at the time that I would love to go back to school and get my PhD. And her response was to ask me why I would waste my time doing something so stupid. So
Oh my goodness.
that was the end of my television career, because I knew at that point I was more interested in the why behind what we were doing than actually the process of what we were doing. So I started just to look around for, what were my options? What did grad school look like? And I found the program at Alabama, and the rest was history.
Wow. I don't. And that doesn't happen often.
Right.
So, okay, so you've mentioned sports a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you're currently researching? And can you give us an elevator, even if it's not, can you give us an elevator pitch on your research?
Yes. So yes, I am firmly centered in the sport media research realm. And if I look at or the elevator pitch, I would say that broadly, my research looks at how athletes are portrayed in the media, and the effect those portrayals have on audiences. And since I've come to Indiana, it's really allowed me to shift my research more into a psychology effects-based path. So that's been really exciting. And a lot of my work will focus on gender, but I also looked at, race, nationality, instances of athlete activism, and really, how do these portrayals affect us on an emotional level? Is if the commentary is overtly sexist, what is our reaction to that? Does it make us angry? Does it lessen our enjoyment? What type of emotional reactions do we have from the narratives and the portrayals that we see in sports media?
Okay, so I've got to ask a follow-up question. How is your favorite athlete portrayed in the media?
It depends on which media outlet they're in. The growth of social media has been great. So one of my favorite athletes to follow is one of the professional triathletes, one of the professional women triathletes. And on her own social media, she puts up these incredible workouts, and she's just an amazing badass. So, to see these incredible workouts, she's in Colorado, and so she's riding and swimming and all of these different things that she does. She gets zero recognition in the mainstream media.
Wow.
So that type of thing. But a lot of the athletes that I look up to right now, a lot of the athletes that I follow, I mean, we can go something with Simone Biles, even if you compare how she's, talked about on NBC or ESPN, if she even makes it onto ESPN, is very different than the narrative she puts forth on her own social media. So that's sort of the easy answer is it depends. It depends what I'm looking at as to how they're portrayed.
Okay, so another follow-up question. If you had to come up with a headline for one of your more interesting findings, what would that headline be?
I think it would. I actually think it would be my dissertation title. The title of my dissertation, which was "Winning Isn't Everything," and so I sort of came up with that title. My dissertation looked at the effective commentary on enjoyment using the 2008 Beijing Olympics. And in looking at that, I mean, a lot of the focus on sport, right, and games is who wins and who loses. But that paper taught me, and as I've gone forward, that there is so much more than the outcome, right? There is so much more that happens from between the time the whistle blows to begin till the time the game ends, that it's not necessarily always the outcome that is going to be the biggest effect on our emotions or on our enjoyment. So that the findings in that study and then going forward opened up that path for me to look at all the various things that happen during sporting events, and how the narratives we hear shape our overall perceptions of what is, air quotes, acceptable in sport.
So, okay, I want to dive a little bit deeper into the perception,
Mhm.
and okay. So, if I'm an athlete, I'm not an athlete, but if I were, and I want something on social media, that may not be what's picked up, right? That's what you have just said. But
Mhm.
then, so do you study kind of how a fan might engage with the social media versus the mainstream media versus, so I'm wondering, like, because I might be discouraged if I didn't get any like coverage on the mainstream media and I'm out there like Iron Manning, um or if what I put out is very different than what's picked up. So kind of what happens with that disconnect, or not even the connection? I mean, there's no connection at all if you're not picked up. So keep talking. Tell us more.
Okay.
In short, keep talking.
just just go on. I'm trying to think of a good example. You might have to edit this pause out. Well, while I think about how to answer this question. So when I look at gender, I don't really do a lot of examinations of fan engagement. I don't study how people are actually interacting with media. I look at how they're reacting to it. So, a study that I did a couple years ago with two of my colleagues at Indiana looked at this commentary from the Rio Games. And we picked 4 different clips. One was beach volleyball, one was swimming, 2 were swimming, one was gymnastics, where all of the comments made by the commentators were sexist on some level, either overtly sexist or subtle sexism. And so what we did is we put we ran people through the lab and we asked about, how does this make you feel when the Hungarian swimmer breaks the world record and her husband gets the credit for her win? Does that lessen your enjoyment? Does it make you angry? And so things like that. So that's really what I'm looking for. So I haven't done a study. I don't have anything in mind, but the portrayal of Simone Biles during the most recent Tokyo Olympics, when she pulled out for mental health reasons. I mean, I saw a lot on social media that was negative, but I'm sure there's multiple studies in there about how was that perceived? Did it make people like her more? Did it make people like her less? Did it take away from this whole idea that she's the GOAT? Some of the comments that I saw is the GOAT will push through no matter what. And I'm like, well, no, but okay. So really, how does that narrative, right? How do those comments, how does that narrative shape our perception, shape our enjoyment? But also, on the flip side, I have another study that I did several years ago now that's in Jobim that looked at athletes' self-presentation on Instagram. How are athletes portraying themselves? Does the narrative change? Do the visuals change when the athletes have control? And I think that's a really interesting vein to study. If I'm not dependent on media, I can put forth anything I want. So let me show myself actually playing my sport, right? And not sitting on the sidelines.
Mhm.
And even for me on a personal level, that's something that I've really taken to heart with my own social media
Mhm.
of I can sit back and complain, female athletes are passive and they're never shown doing their sport. And I'm thinking, well, I'm an athlete and I still do a sport. So let me be at least a small part of making a change there and portraying a female being active, even if it means propping my phone up on rocks and sticks to take a video when I'm running on a path, just to have that motion in there, to have some sort of active portrayal of what I'm doing out there.
That's awesome.
Well, okay, I have a question, but I also have a statement. As a follower of you on social media, I have to say that I actually I enjoy what you put out there about your training, because what it shows me, the non-Ironman individual, what it shows me is literally like how hard you have to work to make that happen. And I think for like women in sports, or even women that compete in one of the disciplines, swimming, running, biking, cycling, I'm just a runner. I drown in pools. I'm a runner.
Yeah.
But like I think what it shows me, and what it kind of keeps me motivated, because it's like there are people that are out there grinding it out as well. So as a fellow less competitive, less successful
Stop.
person, um it's very cool. But here's my question.
Thank you. Actually, let me interrupt you, because I'm going to say you are not just a runner. Take that narrative out. I have run one standalone marathon, and I swear I will never do it again. It was the worst thing I've ever done. It was harder for me than it is training for an Ironman.
Wow.
So when people are like, I'm just a runner, I go, no, because that is a whole different thing that, I'm not a great runner. So reframe your narrative.
I will do that.
Thank you.
Okay, so shifting gears on you just a little bit, does your scholarship make it into your classes? What types of classes have you taught, and does it tie into the research that you do, or is it separate?
It does a lot more now that I'm at Indiana. So before I was at Indiana, I was at Auburn for 6 years. And when I was at Auburn, I was primarily in the PR discipline. So I taught, PR case studies, PR writing, research methods, PR campaigns. And there wasn't a lot of opportunity to bring it in there. I was able to sort of broaden out in my last couple of years there to do, more media effects courses, sports and media courses. And so that's where I started to get more my scholarship in. At Indiana, I teach in the sports media program. So right now I'm teaching sports media and society and a managing sports media course. Those are my two on the regular. But I've also taught sport and television. And so in those classes, it primarily undergrad. And so while I won't have them read my work, I will often allude to, where my work has been applicable. Like when we talk about, gender in sport and, framing of female athletes. And, this is the type of things that research has found. And I won't necessarily say my research, but that's where I'll pull in, my findings and my observations and things like that.
So I have a follow-up for you there.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very broad question, so feel free to go narrower. Where do you see your field and kind of your research niche going in the next 3-5 years?
I think there's a couple different avenues of where it could go. I think, as much as COVID was or has been awful, I don't want to say was awful because clearly it's not over. Probably one of the good things to come out of COVID is that in the past year, we saw the viewership for women's sports explode in a way that we have not seen before. And so there's a lot of conversation about, look, if you put it out there, people will watch it. There is a market for this. And in that market, you still have to be able to tell a good story. Nobody's going to be happy if they turn on the NWSL and they're talking about, oh, and she was out with her boyfriend and, she really likes long walks on the beach. Cause we're like, no, we want to see, let's talk about them being an athlete. I saw a story yesterday that the Washington Spirit just hired a guy to lead their team. And he's like, I don't know much about women's I don't know much about women's soccer. And I'm going, was this really the best hire that you could have made? this is problematic. One, that you made this hire, and two, that he's out there saying, I don't know anything about this.
Right.
So I think I'm hopeful that this market is going to still demand coverage. And I think, as they're demanding coverage, to see, what stories come forth, what kind of narratives, what kind of portrayals, I still think there's, a whole opportunity there. I think there's also, and I've started to walk down this path, I think there's going to be a lot of interesting opportunities when we talk about transgender participation in sport and what that means for female athletes and, sport in general.
Gosh. So many possible follow-ups here.
I know.
But I'm going to shift gears on you again, Lauren.
Sure.
When you were at University of Alabama in the College of Communication and Information Sciences, I know that you did have some overlap with Dr. Jennings Bryant. And I was wondering if you had a good Jennings story that you wanted to share, or talk about a class that you might have taken with him.
Definitely. I think everybody has a Jennings story, because he's just, he was just this larger than life presence. And even now, every once in a while, I'll still go, wow, I got to study, with I got to take classes from him. And that's really amazing. Because, any seminal piece you read, especially with media effects, it probably has Dr. Bryant's name on it.
Right.
But my first semester, I took media theory, theory with him. And so I was, fresh into the doctoral program, and really, I think I decided in that spring to apply to Alabama and got in. So there wasn't a big lead time between me applying and me starting, but we got to theory. And I think anybody that has taken a class with Dr. Bryant knows that when he hands back a draft of your paper, if he uses red ink, it looks like someone died, like just stood over and bled out on your paper. And so that first semester, I think we handed in the first draft of our lit review, and I was feeling really good about it until I got it back. And that semester he used purple, a purple pen, because it was nicer. But I just remember looking at it going, oh my God, what have I done? I don't belong here. But just, every page was covered in ink, and I was like, oh my God. And it sort of stayed that way. Obviously it was, wonderful feedback, but so I got through theory. I obviously made it. He didn't fail me out of the grad program. But my second year, I took his seminar on children in media, and same thing. We turned drafts in, and toward the end of the semester, one of the drafts I turned in, he handed them all back, and he was using red ink at that time, because I guess we'd been hardened into the ways of corrections. And I remember flipping through the paper, and there was one page that had no marks on it. And I was like, oh. So we got to the next class, and we were talking about our papers. And I said to him, Dr. Bryant, I feel like I have achieved a milestone in my doctoral career. And he said, what was it? And I said, you gave me the paper back, and there is one page, and it has 0 corrections on it. And he did that little chuckle that he did, and he said, we'll give it back, because I clearly made a mistake. And I refused. I said, nope, I'm going to frame it. It's going to stay. So that always makes me laugh to think about that. And I always sort of laugh to myself now when I correct or when I go through a graduate student's paper all right, let me be like Dr. Bryant and not scare them, but, give them that feedback that's really going to help them develop their ideas and all of that. But that will still always makes me laugh to myself when I think about that one page that had nothing on it. So
I want to continue down this route, and for for your looking back at that experience, and then for those folks who may be newer into academia as instructors or faculty, or new into graduate programs, when we think about research and writing, what keeps you motivated to do those corrections and get better? It can come down to minutia. It can be really hard to push through. So what keeps you motivated during those times?
Probably a big motivation is I always want to put my best work out there. So, when I get a revise and resubmit, my process is I don't read it. Like I see it and I read those first couple lines that say, we invite you to revise and resubmit. And I just close the email. I go, all right. And then at a later time, I'll open it and read through it. And that's where I do my unfiltered response, where I will read through where you don't know what you're talking about. You don't understand that, and I do the unfiltered thing. And then I'll sit down and look through and say, all right, what have they found that's similar? Where can I improve this? Because usually there's themes to that. Most reviewers will similarly point out, here's what's missing in the lit review. And so to be able to look back, eventually I go, all right, they have my best interest in mind, even though they don't know who I am. So let me, put this all together and put my best work out. I feel like there's never any shortage of motivation in sport, because there's always something that will, happen that will, there's a scandal, there's drama. And so when things like that happen, sit there and, write down questions about, ooh, what about this? What about this? Going to conferences is always something that keeps me motivated and keeps me engaged. Just hearing other people's, takes on, maybe something that I've been thinking about, to hear their take. But just to, come away from a conference, having heard, days worth of excellent scholarship, it motivates me to go back and say, all right, what can I do that's cool now? And I'm also involved in our Institute for Communication Research here at Indiana. So, to be in our weekly lab meeting, again, with people that are engaged and passionate about research, is always there. So I think my advice there would be to try and put yourself in a situation where you are constantly engaged, where you are constantly inspired, and where you constantly are just motivated to want to produce work, and even to push through those times where you're just like, I can't do this anymore. I'm so tired.
So I feel like I have 29 additional questions that I could ask here.
Sure.
But what we're going to do is have a rapid fire finish, and we may just have to have you back for another podcast episode.
Sure.
You mentioned conferences and how that engagement is one of the things that keeps you motivated. So I want to clarify to our listeners, that means you're actually attending the conference and attending sessions rather than bebopping around town and all of that sort of stuff. But
that part is motivating too. So
right. We've all experienced virtual conferences over the last year to 18 months. But what conference are you looking forward to attending in the future when we return to in-person conferences?
There's two. The first one would be the International Association for Communication and Sports Summit. It will be in Philly hopefully in March, if we can get COVID under control and be in person. But that's one of my favorite conferences because it is small, it is sport focused, and it is the best group of people. So it's all sport, all day, all the time. And just the group of scholars that regularly go to that conference are so supportive and welcoming. And, I've never met somebody there that I thought, wow, they were kind of not awesome. So it's a great environment. And if you're a grad student and you're interested in sports scholarship, that's one I would definitely recommend because we love grad students at that conference. The second one is ICA, which is my other favorite one. There's a sport division there. So I see a lot of the same scholars, but also, there's more of a breadth at ICA. There's more divisions to go to. So, I can go over to mass comm or gender studies and just see different areas and what people are doing. And get more of that breath. And the fact that it's supposed to be in Paris this year is not a hard sell either. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that one happens too.
Yes. And I'll just say, you're not the only person that said that. So
Yes.
we have a pretty consistent theme going across the ICA in Paris.
So we should do a live podcast then from ICA in Paris.
Oh, what a great idea.
Yep.
That is, I love that idea.
Yeah.
Lauren, it has been so great getting to catch up with you today and hearing about what you're doing now and hearing about all of this excellent research and scholarship. Thank you for taking the time in your day to chat with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Lauren.
Thanks so much for joining us today for our conversation with Dr. Lauren Reichart Smith. I do want to note that just 1 week prior to this episode airing, she competed in and completed her third Ironman triathlon. She's a rock star for sure. And today's conversation was so much fun. And guess what? Next week, same thing, minus a triathlon. Next week, we talk with Dr. Iggy Fosu, who is now the Department Chair of Media and Communication at Stanford University, just an hour up the road from us. But his path to this new administrative position certainly wasn't linear, and he's got some funny stories to tell us about this path. Tune in next week when we chat with Dr. Iggy Fosu.